we invited 2 assembly members and 2 senators. And just want to point out that one of our invited speakers, Chris Taylor, has come down with the flu and sends her regrets. We told her, look, there'll be a doctor in the house. But that's how sick she is. So I very much appreciate Fred Clark for standing in Chris Taylor's place. Next to Fred is Senator Dale Schultz from Richmond Center. Next to him is Jennifer Shilling, State Senator from La Crosse, and Gary Tauken, Representative Gary Tauken from Fondul and Shawano County. I'll turn it over to Christian.
Thank you very much. This is an unusual situation for me to be in. Typically, I'm on the menu, not one of the servers, so it's a little bit different to orchestrate it that way. I do know that we stand between you and lunch, so we'll try to stay on time. When Michael originally called me and asked me to do this, I said, sure, I'll do it. And I got thinking about what my real job here is to tell one of our distinguished members of the legislature, you've spoken long enough. So, with that, we did talk a little bit. I wanted to give just a couple minutes for each one of our speakers to do some introductory comments. Then we got some questions that we'll go through. Probably give each one of them the first shot at one of those questions if we have time. If we have time again, we'll turn over to Q&A from the audience. So I'll start this one.
Thank you. As was mentioned, my name is Gary Tauken. I'm a dairy farmer by trade from Shawano, Wisconsin. I live about 20 miles west of Green Bay. Go Pack. We milk 1,000 cows, run about 2,500 acres. I farm with 3 brothers and my folks. And so the renewable energy is near and dear to my heart. Not that we have a digester at this time, but it's something we've been considering ever since they started going up in the state of Wisconsin. I've been on sabbatical for the last 6 years representing our state in the legislature. But I did take the opportunity a couple of years ago. I had a little extra time in 2010, and I called a friend of mine who'd been trying to get me to Germany for a couple of years, and we went over to Germany to look at the innovative things they've done there in renewable energy. They're by far the most advanced in the world. And so I saw solar all over, I saw wind all over, I saw biomass being used in breweries that was talked about earlier, and methane digesters. We have more than any other state, but we're at 30, a little more, a little less. Over there, when I was there 2 years ago, they had 5,000 digesters. They had between 7,000 and 8,000 a day. Of course, they do things differently. They pay a lot. They pay twice as much for renewable energy as the consumers pay to get it. So they have a different incentive scale, but we have to find a way to utilize the 2 resources we have a lot of in the state: cows, manure, and biomass. We've got trees, corn stalks, and other feedstocks. So those are going to be my priorities, and we'll talk a bit later about the innovative ideas that we're talking about there. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm State Senator Jennifer Shilling representing the 32nd Senate District, which is Monroe County, La Crosse, Vernon, and Crawford County. So everything from Toma down to Prairie du Chien. And as you've heard from the speakers today and other panelists, I almost have to be interested in sustainability efforts and renewable efforts, because Western Wisconsin really has a strong heartbeat in developing that, and not just talking about it, but putting their talk into action. And as I represent that part of the state, we are the home to obviously 2 world-class healthcare systems with Gunderson and Mayo, Organic Valley, of course. We have Quick Trip, Inland Printing, and our own buildings, or our own institutions of higher education, as they are looking to develop buildings on their campus, looking for sustainability measures. And as I travel throughout the 32nd District, I'm just struck as when we talk about some of these sustainability efforts and these renewable efforts, it's businesses, it's healthcare, it's education, it's agriculture, it's local government. I mean, everywhere you go, you can see its impact and its efforts, and you can see those key players in the region that are doing it. And I think one of the things that struck me, and I've heard Dr. Thompson talk about their efforts at Gunderson quite a bit, And it strikes me that many of these, what they have in common, these groups, is that they did not wait for government to do something. That they said, this is what we are going to do. We believe in these values. This is our responsibility. And we're going to go ahead and do it. And we're going to be kind of those trailblazers. And we will then tell our story, and we will see that success with and tell that story to our elected officials. And if it's at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, working with our city council and our county board, that they have been in groups like them, and businesses and nonprofits have been, those innovative groups have not wanted to just sit by the sidelines and wait for government to do something, but they've said, hey, this is something that we believe in and we're going to move forward, and you guys can catch up with us because we're going to be on the cutting edge. But some of the other programs in Western Wisconsin that really are some of the innovative collaborative efforts, and I think that's a theme that I hear a lot, is we have a lot of partnerships, a lot of collaboration in Western Wisconsin on these efforts. Western Technical College recently purchased Angelo Dam in Monroe County, and they are looking at hydropower. And there they're looking at using that, but also developing a curriculum, developing training, working with cranberry bogs and the technology for hydroelectricity. That's something that is really innovative. We've heard a lot of the successes of Gunderson Lutheran or of Organic Valley. And as a result of the E3 coordination that we have had, or the E3 coalition, we've got local units of government that are coming together to look at their best practices in Western Wisconsin and say, what are you doing in your community to try to lower those energy dollars in your budget, and let's replicate those best practices. So again, that collaboration and partnership with E3, with Vernon and Crawford counties, and then 8 other local municipal interests. City Brewery we talked about, the Cashton Wind Farm and cooperation with local unit of government. And then just recently I was in Lafarge last week and I had a cup of coffee with a group that's Bring It Home Biofuels Co-op. And they are partnering with Organic Valley, again, kind of looking at sort of that anchor interest to develop that biodiesel fuel so that folks can utilize that and look for a co-op there and continue to look at some of the ways that they can try to mitigate costs and peaks with those fuel costs. And looking at the popular Farm to School program, they want to develop Farm to Fuel program, working with our farmers there. So it really is interesting that there's a lot of exciting things, innovative things that are happening, and again, kind of that keeping my finger on the pulse of what's happening in Western Wisconsin is exciting because we have a lot of model programs that are developed and looking at other communities across the state, but across the country as well, are kind of looking to see what's happening in Wisconsin with some of the renewables.
I don't think I can talk that fast. You got to admire Jen Shilling because she is enthusiastic, and it's not just energy, it's in everything she does, and it's always a treat to be with her. My interest in this subject matter was really largely driven by my constituents, particularly a number of job creators that I know, Energy Unlimited in Dodgeville, Todd Timmerman of Timmerman Talents in Platteville. And you know, when you have people who are creating jobs, who are doing exciting things, and you're a legislator, it's just sort of a natural to sort of want to get together and do things. And I have to confess, I don't serve on the utility committee, and so my knowledge of this whole subject matter is certainly less than most people I interact with. But fortunately, one of the things that I like about these folks is they're evangelistic in spreading and educating the word, and that works for me. I have to tell you that these days, being in the legislature after a number of years, I spend probably most of my time thinking with some of my colleagues why we don't get anything done. And you know, you look at Washington, D.C., and you know, fiscal cliff is now, you know, in the lexicon, and a lot of people want to ban it, and I don't know what we're going to have for the next 3, you know, giant clashes in the federal government. But I remember clearly when I ran for Congress, came in number 2, that I used to be fond of telling people that the opposite of progress was Congress. And, you know, the fact is, the legislature these days has a lot of the same similar symptoms, and we need to deal with that, because these are important issues. And I believe that, you know, we're so used to fighting and forming up teams that's what we do. I always know it's going to be a bad day, or at least a bad conversation, when the first question somebody says, "Which team are you on?" And I'm, a little stunned, and I've learned to look them right in the eye and say, "I'm on the people's team, all of the people. Which team are you on?" And I think as legislators, it's important for us to get back to that point where we're really concerned about all the people and making sure that we come up with win-win solutions for everyone, rather than alternating who's in power, who's being served, and who's being disadvantaged. It's a recipe for just rolling back the other team's policies time after time. And I firmly believe that if we're going to get anywhere with energy, we have to have a massive educational effort, and my small contribution to that is really Professor Tim Bay, who's here today, who sat me down when I started talking to him about my frustrations with these job creators who couldn't seem to make the system work, and me swinging wildly, sponsoring an audit of Focus with Rob Coles, and just trying to, make an impact, to step back and say, all right, what are the policies in the state? So to that end, we sat down and talked with the Ledge Council to pull together some papers that could be given to the newer legislators, and I noticed these days that there are a lot of new faces that Jim and I don't know, because we've had a big turnover in the legislature. And then second of all, we need to sort of reach out and listen to a lot of people. And to that end, Professor Bay has conducted 38 interviews with stakeholders of all kinds. We've had a number of legislators who sat down and provided him advice to make sure that we were comfortable that we were getting all sides of the issues in Wisconsin. Non-attributed interviews that will be pulled together so that the legislature can be presented with what does the public think in this state. And from there, try to craft win-win solutions. I think that's critically important if we're going to get someplace. That means it can't just be a day for solar or wind advocates to win and the utilities to lose, or vice versa. I think the policy, recommendations included in the packet are excellent, but we have to find a way to make sure that we go together forward as a whole state, not just part of us at a time, and then the other half trying to pull everybody back or reverse course. So those are my comments, and I appreciate being here today.
Good morning. I'm Representative Fred Clark, and I'm here today simply because I was looking for an opportunity to get in and out of the mist and drizzle. Walked in here, and Jennifer said, "Fred, why don't you fill the hole on our panel?" Which I'm happy and honored to do. I am serving in place of my colleague, Chris Taylor, who is out with the flu, I think, today. But I represent the 81st Assembly District, which includes portions of Columbia County, most of eastern Sauk County, and a small part of Iowa County, and the northwest part of Dane County. It's my third term in the legislature, and prior to coming to elected office, I had worked and continue to work as a forester and natural resource consultant based in Sauk County. I don't serve on the relevant energy committees in the Assembly today, but I, like my colleagues, share a continual interest in this issue. I think so much of what we're talking about today, what all of you have been talking about, touches on the quality and the opportunity and the continuation of rural life in Wisconsin. And as we think about the future of our farming culture in this state and our farm assets and our farmers, energy is, I believe, one of the critical opportunities that we need to unleash in order to help assure the future for rural working lands. As a natural resource manager, I do serve on the Committee on Environment and Forestry in the Assembly, and on the Committee on Natural Resources. And I've also served for 8 years on the Wisconsin Council on Forestry, which advises the governor and the legislature on forestry issues. We, as many of you know, we have almost 16 million acres of productive forest land in Wisconsin. That's almost half the state. And there is a resource there that obviously provides tremendous opportunity to help meet our energy needs. And we also have an industry, the pulp and paper industry, which has made Wisconsin up until now the nation's leader in paper production, but as many of you are aware, that's a status that's changing. So as that industry, through globalization, through competitive market pressures, begins to really decline, we are going to either need to find other markets for the type of wood that used to go into pulp and paper, or we'll start to see a reduction in the income opportunity from forest land, and that's going to provide great threats for us. So I'm very interested in the type of energy initiatives that, especially at the right kind of scale, can allow small producers to generate income, meet their energy needs, and help keep us less reliant on importing and spending that $15 billion that come from out of state. So I came here today to learn, but I'll try to offer what I can.
Thank you all very much. I happen to run into Representative Falcon first, so he's going to get the first question. He needs to bring out his crystal ball and tell us what kind of energy legislation he expects to see in this upcoming session, and then comments from the rest of the group as well.
Okay, I think some of these bills I know are coming. Some of these bills I know will be talked about, and the legislation will take some time. I was involved last year in the Utility and Energy Committee, and we had a telecommunication bill that took 5 years. So because we talk about these things doesn't mean it's going to happen, but at least we've got the discussions going and we're moving in the right direction. So one of the bills that Chris and I, our esteemed moderator, have been working on with Al and about 20 stakeholders deals with the property tax exemption for biogas, which would synchronize and make it similar to what we have in wind and solar. So that's a bill that the utilities aren't really affected by, but it'll be a positive and help promote that product. Another bill that Chris Taylor and I, our esteemed colleague who is under the weather today, and I certainly understand because I was a week and a half ago too, but her and I have been working for the last 6 months trying to develop legislation, and just as background, I've got a producer that lives just north of me that put in 2 biodigesters costing $5 million, and the utility, he signs short-term contracts for the electricity, and it really doesn't pay unless he gets at least 7 cents for his electricity. And the problem that we have now is the contract he has, they want the electricity 5 days a week and not on weekends. So we have to have, as producers, and if we want to promote biogas and biomass, we have to have predictability and certainty for those organizations that put up the facilities. And so that's the background of why I'm really interested in this. So Chris and I started working 6 months ago, and of course, we put together 5 drafts. Chris has been intimately involved too, but the utilities, we passed some legislation last year that allowed hydro to come from Canada into the U.S., and they're able to get that very cheap. And that's good for the consumers, and that's good for the utilities. Unfortunately, we still have cheap electricity in the state, and that's the challenge that we have. So we're working very diligently to try to develop this purchase power agreement, which would exempt the people that put these facilities up from being utilities monitored by the PSC. So we're working on that. We're working on a net metering pricing bill that would that is going to take some time too. We have the legislation that Minnesota put together over the last 3 terms, and so that'll be the framework for what we try to do in that area. Those are 2 bills that we're interested in moving forward on. I expect that, and my interest is more in the long term. Al Ott's bill, I think, is a short-term bill. I'm looking for the long term, trying to develop this, working with Michael Vickerman and the team here at Renew, Keith Riopel and the team over at Clean Energy and others, to try to develop legislation that's going to be beneficial to the state of Wisconsin, create jobs and economic development, and utilize the resources we have here in the state. We also want to make sure that we promote diversity. And one of the issues that we're dealing with now is that we have 2 nuclear plants in the state. One, Dominion, is going to close down. We'll lose 5% of our electricity. 400 jobs that pay over $100,000 a piece are going to be going bye-bye. I think one of the things we should do is lift the nuclear moratorium. That doesn't mean we're going to have a big expansion of nuclear, but at least it allows them to study it. It is clean energy, so we'll see where it goes. Another is tort reform. Stray voltage has been a problem in the state of Wisconsin, but there's science that says there's a cutoff where it really affects animals and it doesn't affect animals. Say it's a half a volt. There have been lawsuits that have been won that are lower than a half volt, and so the ratepayers and the utilities have to cover those expenses, and if the science doesn't meet that standard, should they have to do that. So I think there's going to be tort reform in that area to clear that area up. I also, when farmers produce methane, they can produce electricity. If you have a digester, you could also produce compressed natural gas. So I have heard that there's going to be legislation dealing with compressed natural gas. So there's more that's happening in the area, but those are the ones that I understand. So I'll pass it on to anybody else that has more knowledge.
Thank you. One of the problems when you serve on the panel with legislators, you start talking about legislative bills will be introduced, you quickly start crossing off your list of the ones that your colleagues have now talked about. But one that I want to talk about, I serve on the Joint Finance Committee, and so we're going to be dealing with the budget here pretty quick. In February, the governor is expected to unveil his budget, and then the Finance Committee will be working on that. One of the issues that I will be taking particular interest is, of course, the focus on energy bill, or focus on energy program, and where that comes in. Certainly last session, there were some pretty deep cuts and devastating cuts to that focus on energy program. And while some of my colleagues on the committee were not quite as enamored with the program as some others in the administration, that we certainly need to continue to invest in that focus on energy program and look at that. And as I talk to businesses around the communities that I represent, that they're looking for some additional flexibility. So while it's not just some additional investment and resources in this program, also maybe changing some of the verbiage included in focus on energy to allow for additional flexibility. Also, I think 75% of the funds must be used for biofuels and 25% for wind and solar. And interests have said we'd really like to bump up that wind and solar number. So we'll be taking a look at that and talking with folks there. Recently, I met with some of my some of my co-ops, electrical co-ops in the district. They talked about talked about some of geothermal. It is not currently listed as renewable, and what statutes we need to do to change for geothermal, and taking a look at that as well. I think there's always deregulation, that's always on the in someone's kind of wheelhouse or vocabulary. Taking a look at that, and we'll have to keep our eyes on deregulation as we're moving forward. And then Dairyland Co-op is in Dairyland Power Co-op is in the district that I represent, and they recently spent millions moving some of their spent fuel, and so there had been legislation in past sessions that were introduced for a dry cask storage tax. So we're going to have to take a look at that. For that dry cask storage tax would be problematic. So I want to leave a couple bills of my other my colleagues have some of that, but certainly focus on energy as I sit on the budget committee, and that will be coming up here pretty quick. We'll be taking a look at that. And I don't serve on one of the utility committees either, energy utilities either, so there'll be, if those bills do come up, it'll probably get to the floor once many of us will have an opportunity to weigh in on those.
All right. Well, let's do that then. Really what we're going to get into next is kind of lobbying 101 from the experts who are the ones who receive all of that from all of us. So I think I'll start with Senator Schultz if I can, that is looking at what's the best strategies for introducing the bill. You work with the administration, stakeholders, what kind of groups do you need to get together, and how do you approach legislators to be successful in that?
Well, I think, again, the key to long-term sustained success in the legislature is really bipartisanship, and it's getting people listening to information together so that they come away with a sense that they understand the facts. And then it's really relatively simple. It's getting people to buy into the idea that we're all here working for the same purpose. Now, there are a variety of techniques you can do that. Everybody has a role to play. But a personal relationship, I think, with a legislator was without question over time the tried and best method of influencing what happens. And then, you know, I think personalizing, you know, phone messages or emails or letters are critically important. And I would also say on the other side of being effective is, for those of us who care about renewables, it's important that people be united. I'm absolutely convinced of that. In my experience in working with these job creators, I'm tired of listening to people complain about big wind or big wind not caring about little wind. You know, I'm sitting there thinking, really? I mean, how we are going to move forward if we can't all be together? Or people who are advocates for solar saying wind doesn't work, or, you know, both of them saying biomass doesn't make any sense. The one beauty about being from southwestern Wisconsin is we have a lot of challenges, and one of those is economic. And to get anything done, we all have to work together. And the beauty is we listen to each other in that process, and when we listen to each other, I think we can find some common ground. So I think it's important to find common ground in the legislature as well as in the industry. Brett?
Thanks. You know, in the Assembly, we had our first day back in session yesterday, and as a result, we'll now have to learn how to speak concisely and within a 2-minute time limit. No more 61-hour marathon sessions. Those will be a thing of the past. But
And wear a tie.
well, that's right. That's why I'm proud today to not have one on. But we also had a lot of discussion about it's a new day, and I think we probably heard 15 legislators from both sides of the aisle say it's a new day. Let's put the rancor and the divisiveness of the last session behind us and think about where we can work together and sort out our differences like people expect to see happen in the legislature. And I am truly optimistic about that. I think a lot of the discussions that we needed to have last session just couldn't be had because of the nature of the division. But you know, the fact that Senator Schultz and Representative Falcon and many other of their colleagues, and Jennifer and my colleagues, all care about these issues and understand that deep down it's a key part of economic recovery in Wisconsin and energy security. This shouldn't have to be political. So you do need to build individual relationships with legislators. You should be reaching out to certainly members of both parties. There's no reason to, you know, frost over it. The Republican Party has the majority in both houses and the governor's office. So you need to build relationships with Republican legislators and the governor's office if you're going to see something get signed into law. But these are issues that affect everybody. And I think the coalition exists to build sufficient support to allow some of these proposals to make it through, like focus on energy, like some reasonable changes to things like net metering and allowing third-party investors to put Wisconsin capital into energy projects. So I think we have to be smart about how we approach it. We have to try to minimize the ideology, and I think breaking up proposals into smaller bite-sized pieces, in my opinion, is probably going to be effective most of the time.
All right, thanks. I'm going to go to Senator Shilling, if you would. And we're looking at legislation and looking at trying to move that forward. It's not only the legislature, but it's other stakeholders as well. Particularly on this topic, what's the renewable type messages that are going to be most effective? You know, is it energy independence? Is it job creation? Is it a combination? And is it a different message for different audiences?
Yeah, well, I think jobs, jobs, jobs. I mean, that is sort of the buzzword in the legislature. That's what we should be focused on. And Governor Walker has really said this is what he wants to focus on, and kind of given a brushback pitch to some of his colleagues to say don't bring things that are kind of divided or that divide us and take us away from economic recovery in the state. And as I am talking with groups and listening to them in my community, that's what they're selling, that the business is saying we can create jobs here, that our institutions of higher learning are saying we could do some training here, we can have jobs in the maintenance of it, but also businesses, the bottom line is it's cost savings to them, that they can reinvest in other ways. So I think, you know, as we look at sort of decreasing our carbon footprint here in the state, being environmentally responsible, but it is, I think that jobs is that common theme that legislators will be reacting to, and what this means for developing and utilizing our own resources here in our state and reinvesting in our own communities where we can. That is kind of the winning message on a whole host of other things that are coming people coming into my office to talk about how if we do X, Y, and Z, it equals this for job creation, it equals this for economic recovery. And this certainly is a strong piece for in our communities and in our state to kind of have that have a winning success formula in that area.
Anybody else have a comment on that?
I think, I was amazed. I thought this was a great example this morning. Renewable energy and conservation go hand in hand. And when you can flip a switch and save $19,000 or pay $2 million and save $1 million a year, that's a pretty good thing. And as far as the question about whether you ought to change audiences, change your message with audiences, no. Tell the truth and keep your message consistent and saleable. And I would also like to say, when it comes to developing the legislation, you all that are involved in Renew and other organizations can really make an impact by keeping in touch with people that Michael Vickerman and his team, and letting them know what issues need to be resolved, need to be worked on as far as legislation, and making sure that they find champions in the legislature to work with them and you, and be inclusive and help develop that legislation, because it takes a lot of stakeholders who are involved and informed to be able to move forward in those areas.
For those who don't know, I was in the utility industry for over 3 decades, and having been in that group, we didn't always agree on every issue. True of the renewable community as well. What advice do you have for this group on how they can come together on different issues? What's the strategy for that? Should they take their separate issues piece by piece? And what's the role for an organization like Renew Wisconsin?
I may be one of the least qualified people in the room to try to answer that question. But, you know, well, to take an example from the 2009 session, what was called the CEJA bill, or the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which is sort of the big climate change renewable energy package. In some ways, even in what at that time was a Democratic legislature and governor's office, it was a bill that died of its own weight. So I think if you took every single issue that is important to the people here and that we believe is part of what we need to do for renewable energy in this state, my perception is you'd come away with an unwieldy product. And of course, for every winner there's a loser, and if you stack up enough losers, they have enough, you know, ability to really oppose something. So segmenting things into sectors, I think, is going to make sense. And helping build a coalition that can help you win with each one of those. And, you know, any one of the 4 of us here can drop legislation into the speaker's office, you know, every single day, but that's not going to really help get it passed. So I think that there's a lot of background work that needs to get done to develop a concept, to sell it, to build a coalition in support of that concept, and get the governor's staff nodding their heads and DOA, and other people who we know will be important for future passage, before a legislator goes ahead and introduces something. I think if you really want to see something work, that's, I think, what has to happen.
Other comments?
Okay.
Well, I agree with Fred because almost when it comes to energy, there are technical bills and they ought to be worked on independently. So it's, unless you can get all the stakeholders together on a specific issue, but I just don't see it. We haven't developed a national policy for energy in this country. There's people working to try to develop a statewide energy policy. That would be very helpful on setting the direction and the tone. But until we get to that point, I think independent, working on individual projects is the best way to go.
I would just add, as a legislator, nothing leaves a more sour taste in our mouth than turf wars. And when groups come in, and I've been on the health committee for many years, and I see it, and I really like to see those groups work out the issues before they come in with a piece of legislation. Those turf wars are tough for us to stomach. We don't want to have to pick sides. We want to have that consensus, like Senator Schultz had mentioned earlier. And we don't want to have, the big guys versus the little guys, and they're all kind of on the same team in general, but they have their own specific carve-out issues. That working together and it doesn't happen in one session. I mean, there are bills that I've been working on with groups that it takes, 2, 4, 6 years to sometimes get everybody to the table and get them to move. And I think the best public policy is probably when everybody's grumbling a little bit, that you have to recognize either you get none of the loaf or you want all of the loaf. You're going to get none of it every single time. And you need to be able to be realistic when you go in, because while this issue is like the most important issue to you, you have to recognize that we've got hundreds of other groups that are coming in with issues that's the most important issue to them as well. We need to weigh all of that as we're developing good public policy.
Last session, Fred Clark and I had, well, it's actually the last 2 sessions, had an interesting experience. We worked on the state's managed forest law. And there are a lot of concerns about it, a lot of complaints. And Fred ran a very, very good Ledge Council committee on the subject, and I inherited all of his work at the end and was poised to look like a hero. And I said, Fred, you've done a great job. You deserve to be able to present the work of the committee. And he did a wonderful job, and everybody on the committee voted for the package. And as soon as it got to the legislature, you know what happened? We had everybody breaking up and going in a different direction. And boy, talk about leaving a sour taste in your mouth. It was really frustrating, especially when they just couldn't see the big picture that none of them was going to get what they wanted because they didn't stick together. Now, the point of this story is I wholeheartedly agree that it is important to have a common vision and to recognize that common vision can't be realized unless people stick together. On the other hand, I've adjusted my thinking a little bit, and perhaps Gary is absolutely right, that to move forward, maybe not putting it all into an omnibus bill would be a better approach. Now, there could be some omnibus bills, but if it gets so big and so technical, pretty soon people's eyes glaze over and it gets difficult to get the momentum to get things done. But you know what? When you break things up, some people are going to win sooner than others. But if you lose sight of that common purpose, in the end, everybody's going to lose.
Thank you very much. As I look at the clock, I first want to commend our legislative panel here that not only was this not an all-night session, this one was going to end on time. But more importantly, thank you all for some very sage advice to folks here on how to approach the legislative process, how to build coalitions and go ahead together. And hello, Brett. How are you?
Yeah, Chris, I actually have a question for you, so if I may.
I'm the moderator, so.
No, it's important. I'm Brett Hulsey. I am on the Energy Committee, and sorry I was late. I had another meeting. But we talked the last couple of days about the Energy Jobs Bank. Are you moving forward with getting the administration of Governor Walker to support opening up the $1 billion managed by the Board of Public Lands for energy efficiency and renewables on the 9,000 state buildings and 3,000 schools? Do you think we can get that in the budget this year?
Probably a little early to say we've begun some discussions on that. For those of you that don't know, the State Board of Public Lands has a fund and a purpose for that, primarily to help local and municipal and county governments to do certain things. Energy efficiency certainly being one of them. And finding a way for we talked with Tia about how we might be able to make that more effective, to make that, they're having a little bit of difficulty getting money out the door, but it's financing that's available, and I think as Representative Halsey has indicated, if we have a pot of funding that's available, and we have a need out there trying to find a way to connect that together. I don't think we have all the pieces put together on that, but we're working on it, and I'm thinking that we could, as we look at it now, maybe something that we don't need legislation to do, we're just going to need some good, clear thinking and some perseverance to make it happen.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, with that, I think we head for lunch, right?